Good afternoon, teacher and classmates. My name is Josefa Quijada, and today me and my group mates Jose Ignacio Calderon, Paula Cofre, Lucas Martin, Victoria Salazar Cruz, and Nicolás Tovar, we're going to talk about how does the growing importance of global markets and multinational corporations alter the role of the states. Before we begin, we would like to inform you that we decided to focus our discussion on the case of host countries in Latin America. Also, for this presentation, we will begin with an introduction to globalization and multinational corporations. Then we're going to further the discussion from a theoretical approach to later move on to the Latin American case and finally a conclusion. First of all, globalization and multinational corporations. Globalization understood as the process of the integration of national economies into the international economy through trade, direct foreign investment, short-term capital flows of workers and humanity generally, and flows of technology, has brought a lot of changes to our world, and indeed, it is a defining characteristic of the current international economy, directly affecting the political international system. In this context, multinational corporations have played a key role, being one of the main actors in the international system and the global market. And as they were first defined by David Lilienthal in 1960, we understand multinational corporations as the corporations that have several headquarters or venues in different countries and that operate and organize under the laws of these different countries. Now, even though multinational corporations were conceptualized for the first time in the 1960s, several authors say that their origin dates back to the 17th and 18th century with the colonial trade and its trade companies, such as the British East India Company, the Hudson Bay Company, the Levant Company, and many others. But as the author Roald Oller Newman said, it wasn't until after the Second World War that the tendency to install business operations in different countries and continents increased. Also, it is important to differentiate types of multinational corporations. Here I would like to refer to the same author, Roald Oller Newman's categorization of multinational corporations. He differentiates between vertical and horizontal. The first vertical multinational corporations are the ones that geographically fragment their production into different states of the productive process. And by doing this, they locate their activities that require the most specialized work in developed countries, while the activities that require a more intensive workforce will be located in developed countries. Now, on the other hand, we have the horizontal multinational corporations that are the ones that have several headquarters that reproduce the same productive activity in several places. That way, they function on an economy of scale model with lower transportation costs. Now, multinational corporations operate on a global scale, facilitated by globalization and being part of this process. And considering this, we could say that they are important to the global political economy because of two main reasons. The first one is that they have an essential role in the globalization process as a channel for foreign direct investment, and the second one is because of their influence in the dynamics of the chains of international trade. Multinational corporations constitute an economic and political reality to the modern world, being one of the most important institutions in the capitalist world economy, affecting home and host countries that participate in this process. In this context, we can say that the global economy is hierarchically divided, with the states in substantial different positions according to the International Division of Labor. In a world system as the one Wallerstein describes, in which the structure, domination, and dependency plays an important role in how globalization and multinational corporations affect the performance of the states. At this point, it becomes crucial to pay attention to how the country home or host respond to the necessities of globalization, global markets, and multinational corporations. Since the capitalist system needs a state that acts as facilitator to the market mechanism and that ensures the most optimal environment for business, indeed, Wallerstein said that the capitalist system, and therefore the world economy, requires an international interstate system that enhances positive conditions for the international division of labor, production, distribution and for the incessant accumulation of capital. And so now, in this context, it is worth asking ourselves, what happens with the states? Joseph Stiglitz says, the integration of economies around the world, which has put new demands on nation states at the very same time that, in many ways, it has reduced their capacities to deal with those demands. The nation state today is squeezed on the one side by the force of global economics and on the other side by the political demand for the evolution of power.
So, to understand how the relationships between the states, multinational corporations, and the society operates, we need a theoretical perspective to understand it. By this way, we can catch the specific essence of the problem and the logical structure of how it works. For this seminar, we are going to adopt a new Gramscian theoretical perspective to try to understand the interaction of states, multinational corporations, and the consequence that it had to the economic dynamic of Latin America. As an introduction of the Gramscian perspective, consensus that it is a non-materialistic Marxist theory which uses the categories of the political and intellectual Antonio Gramsci, and some of these are hegemony, ideology, historical bloc, social forces, social class, etc. This theory has the idea of a transnational historical bloc composed by the most powerful actors of the world economic order, as the largest multinational corporations, international banks, business groups, etc., that extend the class domination relations to a global level. So in other words, it's like the expansion of the exploitation, but of the capitalists to a world level. This historic bloc have the ability to shift location among states, enable them to play off less mobile nature labor works against each other. In this way, this historical bloc has the capacity to establish an hegemonic regime, where the worker class around the world identify themselves as the same interests of the multinational corporations, business groups, etc., unless their objective positions are structurally contradictory. By this way, the historical bloc solidifies this hegemonic ideology and benefit the mobility of the capital to take advantage of accumulation with the control of the class consciousness. The historical transnational bloc would have freedom to take alliance with the states and the economic and political elites that are vinculated with the states, making agreements, treaties, and other ways of consensus to benefit both, at the expense of the worker class. So, by this contextualization of this perspective, it raises the question: what is the hegemony we are talking about? How did it work to and relate with MNCS? To define this, Cox describes the principal characteristics of the mechanism of multinational organizations to get into the power. First of all, an hegemonic transnational bloc has to be connected with expansion of the world market. Because of this, it has to be an important actor to improve the expansion of the free flow of actual economic order. To be connected with this interest, the transnational bloc have to be a consequence of the rise of this free flow regime, because with this condition, their interests can be adjusted to the way of a global production that actually imperates. By the same, the global hegemony determines a dominant ideology, getting into the workers' class consciousness to neutralize the potential counter-hegemonic bloc. On the other side, to establish this hegemony, the transnational historic bloc tried to connect their interests with the different political economy actors around the globe. One of them are the elites of the peripheral economies, like Latin America. In this region, the multinational corporations built an alliance with the oligarchies that maintain their power from extractivism, because their interests are structurally connected. Finally, by this constitution of a consumer society, the neutralization of the democracies by the take of control of the finance of the national states and the economic dependence development, the MNCS, or multinational corporations, and their allies would absorb counter-hegemonic ideas. To introduce the contextualization of multinational corporations in this region, I present this outline. What it shows is that the nations in Latin America would integrate to the globalized market by a neoliberal model where the state is a support for the free market, which makes the principal financial and commercial transactions. By this way, the flexibility of exchange rate would benefit multinational corporations, as they can introduce their offers easily to local markets. And this will benefit the alliance of the historical bloc that will be modified by the different conjunctural moments.
So, while talking about MNCs in Latin America, it is necessary to talk about the American extractivism that started happening in the region at the end of the 19th century. Between the American companies that perform this measured extractivism, we can find the banana companies, like the United Fruit Company, who had great power over the Central American and Colombian territories, and the mining companies, especially in Chile, like the Braden Cooper Company or the Chile Exploration Company, both from New York. Jumping forward a few decades, we can see the first MNCs appearing in the Latin American area, particularly through monopolistic practices. For example, in the 60s, tobacco companies like the British American Tobacco and the Philip Morris Company bought virtually all Latin American tobacco companies. However, by 1982, multiple Latin American countries experienced a deep economic crisis that was accompanied with numerous coups d'etat that put the region in both an unstable political framework and an unstable economic situation. Of course, this was also affected by the 1980 global economic recession. All of these factors made the FDI dry up in the region, furthering the effect of the crisis. Some causes of the crisis were huge external debt caused by a trade deficit, currency overvaluation that led to higher spending, and, at least in the Chilean case, a pegged currency that did not match up with the inflation rates at the time. Nevertheless, these conditions, the Latin American continent managed to experience in the 90s a boom on FDI once the authoritarian governments transitioned to more participative democracies. With neoliberal reforms installed in the dictatorships still present, the commitment of these new governments to complementary governance practices, like caring for the poor without really being a reformed social welfare state, made an incredible surge on the FDI, with $18 billion on the 90s to $108 billion in 1999. To quote Martin Sousa Aliu, three conditions were crucial in this increase of FDI. First, privatization of state-owned enterprises. As the authors state, from 1991 to 2000, state-owned enterprises' share of the 500 companies' sales declined by 10%, while the multinationals' share increased by 13%, almost a inverse kind of growth. In Argentina, for example, Spain's oil firm Repsol bought Argentina's state-owned YPF in 2002. Second, battles for regional dominance between MNCs in the region. MNCs will often race to buy local companies to have regional monopolies over certain industries. Nestle and Umbrella are great examples in the ice cream and the dairy industries. Third, MNC-led industry transformation. MNCs often lead the race in innovation techniques in the region, making it easier for local acquired companies to modernize and make a profit. For example, Walmart and Carrefour. Why is the Latin American market so attractive for investors? According to a paper by Iqbal, Raham, and Hassan on 2016, there are four main components that explain this. First, big market size expressed through any form of GDP in the region. Second, imports, defined particularly as the power that Latin America has as a consumer market, not a producer market. Third, current account balance, defined by a stable trade balance as well as net income and net current. And lastly, but maybe the most important factor, labor force, that was widely available and very, very cheap. Next up, let's take a closer look to the socioeconomic impact of MNCs in Latin America.
Socioeconomic impact and consequences in Latin America. The pervasive trend of massive staff cuts in Latin America by multinational companies has significant social costs and serious economic consequences for the countries of the region and their workers and families. Multinationals are large and growing employers in Latin America, and national authorities have faced a growing loss of power of contract them. Beverly Carlson, Social Affairs Officer for the Business and Productive Development, Division examines the current staff cuts and analyzes the limitation of national authorities to face the growth and concentration of multinational corporations in Latin America. To illustrate the importance of multinationals in the region, the author revisits a recent study carried out by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development and shows that 22 of the multinationals are larger than half of the economies of Latin America and the Caribbean. Excluding the 12 smallest economies, Chile is right above ExxonMobil in the ranking. He emphasizes that as a result of globalization and the growing importance of multinational corporations in the region, many of the key decisions in the area are beyond national control, so that those in charge of making decisions in governments have several limitations to solve this situation. Among other questions it raises, who decides the personnel cuts? Who are affected? What is its magnitude? What are the rules of the game? And how have they changed in recent years? The author reflects on the double disadvantage of Latin America in the globalized economy. Their wages are higher than those of their poorer globalized competitors. At the same time, their skill level is lower than that of the richer globalized competitors and even some of the poorest. In the last century and a half, while global capitalism has advanced, nation states have been giving up part of this sovereignty in terms of socio-economic decisions. Transnational companies have managed to consolidate and expand their growing dominance over life in the world, especially in the last 3 decades. Since the advance of the processes of economic globalization and the expansion of neoliberal policies have served to build a political, economic, legal, and cultural framework on a global scale from which large corporations have resulted to be the main beneficiaries. Multinational companies have come to control most of the strategic sectors of the world economy: energy, finance, telecommunications, health, agriculture, infrastructure, water, the media, the arms, etc. And the capitalist crisis that we are experiencing today has only strengthened the economy role of the capacity for political influence of large corporations, which as soon as they do business with natural resources, public services, and real estate speculation, as with future markets, energy and food, patents on life or land grabbing. The enormous profits accumulated by transnational companies have their origin in the mechanism of extraction and appropriation of economic wealth and are at the base of the function of capitalism, the increasing exploitation of workers and the constant devaluation of wages, the unlimited pressure on the environment is search of raw materials and natural resources, financial speculation both with the surplus obtained and with everything that can be bought and sold, the commodification of more and more of spheres of human activities and the absolute priority enjoyed by the mechanism of reproduction of capital over the processes that allow the sustainability of life have effectively served so that the main managers and shareholders of large corporations become billionaires.
So, have multinational corporations brought some benefits to the region? Well, as you can see here, there are several opinions in relation to the topic. On the one hand, Sidney and Don said that the multinational company must be appreciated in terms of its contribution to the regional economy, not to a particular nation, but to the community of which the nation is. That investment may be bad for the nation, but good for the community. And on the other hand, Gilpin notes that in the relations between states and multinational companies, each has something that the other wants. States control access to their territory, and corporations have capital, technology, and access to world markets. After all, it is known that MNCs are a platform to achieve a better and more convenient insertion in international markets and in the expansion of international trade. So for that reason, these are a fundamental complement to the growth strategy of Latin American countries. In particular, some argue that MNCs usually reach agreements with the host countries, trying to maximize the gains for both, in terms of profits for companies and taxes, jobs, and export capacity for states. So in order to that, MNCs also contribute to generate important scientific advances through large investments in research to diffuse technology around the globe. As an example, 70% of all payments for rights or technology that are made in the world are by multinationals and their subsidiaries. As a result, they help to create a modern sector in developing countries that pays relatively higher wages and generates stable jobs, increasing production and employment. Furthermore, thanks to lower costs, some MNCs sell products at lower prices, which is very positive because consumers increasingly want better and cheaper products wherever they came from. Nevertheless, the most important role that MNCs play in the globalization process is conduits of foreign direct investment flows. Indeed, this can complement domestic investment and thus achieve levels of capital formation capable of generating high rates of economic growth. In the case of Latin American countries, FDI increased 14.6% in 2018. Here we can see, according to a research from CEPAL, how between 2017 to 2018, Brazil and Mexico leads the FDI in the region with 29,761 and 4,452 billions of dollars in the last trimester respectively, followed by Argentina and Colombia. So the matter is, as we saw it, yes, MNCs could have a positive impact in Latin American countries, but at what cost?
To sum up, first we have the crucial points of the seminar. The origin of the multinational corporations dates back to the 18th century, with its major growth after 1945 when the Second World War ended. Since then, their presence in Latin America has been increasing throughout the years. Mechanisms were designed and created by the multinational corporations in order to protect the interests of the elite group in each country of the continent. Neoliberalism and capitalism were the bodyguards of the multinational corporations, which means that these two ideas and the governments where these two ideas ruled always protected the creation and growth of the multinational corporations. Then, in the decades of the 80s and the 90s, occurred the growth of the multinational corporations in Latin America during dictatorships, especially in Chile, Brazil, and Argentina. Then we have a brief comparison if the multinational corporations are good or bad. In first place, we have the neoliberal laws and privatization of enterprises were the ticket of entry to Latin America for the multinational corporations. Then, as they settled down in Latin America, it appeared a loss on the government of independence and economic control. Despite all of that and all the negative consequences that we have seen in this seminar, the multinational corporations help Latin America to expand into international markets and hence its integration to the world's economy. Finally, the multinational corporations help to the diffusion of technology and local markets throughout Latin America and the rest of the globe. Then we have to ask ourselves if is there any space for improvements. And we come up with three very important ideas. In first place, we think that there has to be an active role of the governments to secure the growth of local markets at times. Then, a monetary injection to fight against poverty, inequality, and the inflation of prices is needed in every government on the continent. And last, and most important, we think that a change on the rules of the game is needed. The state should establish the rules for the operation of the multinational corporations on their country, and not the other way like we have seen in this presentation. Finally, I leave you here the bibliography and references and sources that we have used to gather information for this seminar. With that being said, In name of all of my teammates, I thank you for your attention.